The BEAD program promised to be a once-in-a-generation, if not once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to solve one of America's biggest infrastructure challenges, broadband. But a recent statement by a member of the administration, an NTIA official, is indicating that the NTIA may be preparing to pull the rug out from under the broadband operators in rural areas who are wanting to invest in new networks to serve rural Americans with fiber. Welcome to Broadband Action, a podcast brought to you by Community Broadband Action Network. I'm Curtis Dean. We like to usually talk about a little more cheerful topics here on Broadband Action, but we can't just get away from this one. This is a topic that is going to hurt, and that is recent remarks by Arielle Roth. She's the NTIA Administrator, and she spoke at the Hudson Institute, and what she said should alarm everybody who participated in BEAD, who in good faith offered to solve America's fiber or broadband challenges, and in many cases with fiber networks. It's something we all need to be concerned about, and we all need to activate and contact the decision makers to make sure they don't turn this into what it could be, which is a complete BEAD debacle. Now, a lot of things to talk about here, and so I normally don't read a script. I won't read a script this time, but I've got some things put together, and I want to make sure I'm being accurate with this information. So you might see me looking up once in a while because I want to make sure I'm getting things right. Speaking off the cuff sometimes doesn't allow you to get everything exactly right. So let me take a nice little cup of coffee here, wet my whistle, and on we go. Administrator Roth asserted that BEAD providers must, and I quote, certify in writing that they will not require or take additional federal subsidies, including operational subsidies, to complete or operate their BEAD projects. There it is right there in black and white. It reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of rural broadband economics. You see, the areas that are affected by BEAD are, by definition, the most expensive, the most challenging to serve. These are the places where the private market has already failed, despite decades of various subsidy programs. The federal government has long recognized this as a reality. And that's precisely why we had programs like the Enhanced Alternative Connect America Cost Model, or Enhanced ACAM, put into place in 2023. This program is providing about $18.3 billion to 368 providers across the country in 44 states. These are not construction grants. So these are not go out and build networks. These are maintain the networks that you have, because they recognize that operating networks in very rural areas is way more expensive than operating them in urban areas. The economics don't work. And to make it economically viable for those networks to stay in operation, those operators, those rural providers, in many cases independent and locally and community-owned providers, are getting some additional revenue so they don't have to charge the customer what it actually would take to operate that network, because they know if they had to, people wouldn't subscribe because they couldn't afford to. So really what this statement by Roth is creating is an almost impossible choice. If indeed NTIA does require that providers certified and swear an oath that won't take operational subsidies in order to get that BEAD money, then they're basically asking those providers, and we have a bunch of them that are CBAN members, to make a choice. Choice one, take the funding. Here's your BEAD money. Here's your 75% of that network, that new construction network that you were going to build in that area that has nothing or poor service now. And instead, you can have that money now. But if you do, you'll never be able to keep getting your enhanced ACAM or other federal subsidies. So choose the money now to build new networks that you probably won't be able to sustain over time because they're too expensive to operate. Or the other choice, and I think this is the choice that most will choose, is to decline the BEAD funding. They'll say, thanks, we spent hundreds of hours, we spent lots of money on consultants and engineers in putting together a plan to serve this rural area over here that needs better broadband. And we want to build fiber networks because they are the most future-proof option. But you know what? We can't afford to do that to our customers that already exist, because if we don't have those operational subsidies, their costs will be out of hand. So this is not crying fire in a crowded movie house, folks. This is for real. This is not just theoretical. I've had conversations with a couple of CBAN members just in the past few days since this information first came out, who said, well, if that's the string, I'm done. I'm walking away. In one case, an operator, it was a couple $100,000 to serve 2 or 3, or I think there was like 7 locations. Those locations, by the way, are close to their current service territory, but they're far enough away and through a very sparsely populated area that it would cost a lot to get there. And that's why they applied for and were tentatively supposed to receive the BEAD funding. They'll pass. Another operator, it was somewhere more in the $3 to $5 million range to serve a couple 100, 300 very rural homes. They'll pass. Those people will not be getting fiber. They won't get it through BEAD. They won't get it from these small, independent, community-minded, community-focused, go into the soup and pie supper kinds of providers that are CBAN members. They won't. And nobody else will build it. Nobody else will build fiber to these locations with no subsidy. If you can't make it float at a 75% subsidy, how are you going to make it float at a 0% subsidy? So what's going to happen to these locations? And we know there's hundreds of thousands of them across the nation. Well, they're probably going to get broadband as we define it very poorly and loosely today. Because what's going to happen is if those operators say, we pass on BEAD because we need our ACAM, then the states are going to be forced to go down the list and say, who else applied for those locations? And guess who else applied for those locations? In most cases, one of the satellite providers applied for those locations. Even though it's been proven in research that at least Starlink, the only operational one, Amazon is still vaporware, that they can't support 100 by 20 in mass deployment. Not with their current satellites, not even after they're fully mature. And that's assuming it all keeps going well. So states will be left with no choice but to award to the second or third bidder on the list for that location. That's probably going to be Starlink, maybe Amazon Kuiper in some cases. It may be fixed wireless. And if you live in a location where the fixed wireless actually submitted an application, you should be thanking your lucky stars, because you're going to get better opportunities for better service for longer from a terrestrial-based, ground-based fixed wireless provider than you would if you're going to end up having to rely on Starlink. And that's not a slam on Starlink. It's amazing technology. They've done a lot. It is a service that is needed in some of the most remote and rural areas of America where you can't in any way, shape, or form afford to build a wired network to it. So Starlink plays a role here, but the role should not be to replace a future-proof technology that we have an operator, a company, a responsible company that is at the table saying, I'll do it. I'll build it. I'll get those guys fiber. They'll have fiber forever, and they'll have great service. And I can afford to offer it to them at an affordable rate because I had the help to do it. Instead, they'll be left with Starlink with their $100 a month or more bill for limited data, for data that will not meet the 100 by 20 requirement over time. And we all agree 100 by 20 is just not cutting the mustard in 2025, and certainly won't by the time this network's built out. These networks are built out. But that's your choice. That's your only choice you're going to have, because we've deemed that it is more important to deny these funds to fiber operators or other terrestrial-based operators, because I know there's some coaxial networks out there that were be awarded that would be also superior to satellite in almost every way. But instead, folks, you're going to be stuck with less reliable service that's way more expensive, that has higher latency, has data caps in some cases, and will likely hit a technological ceiling as far as upgradability. That's what you get, folks. That's your reward for living in rural America. Even though your taxes paid for this program just as much as anybody else's. So that's very frustrating. As you know, here at CBAN, we have a strong, passionate support for rural Americans and the services that they need. And everything we do is aimed at trying to help fill those broadband gaps. We always look to see those gaps filled by the kinds of providers that are CBAN members, not big cable, big telecom. Main Street, not Wall Street, is who we want to solve these problems, right? I don't think you can argue that Starlink is Main Street. Probably not Wall Street either, but it's not a street, it's its own damn state, let's face it. So one of the biggest challenges with this pivot, this change of direction, this I don't know, I've got whiplash just thinking about it. It really seems to absolutely directly contradict congressional intent on this bill. Now, I know there's a lot of things that have been happening that seem to go against congressional intent. And one can make a fair argument that, well, if Congress thinks that, they should step in and do something, which they won't, we know, because under the current political climate, they're entirely disincentivized to say anything. So the FCC, when it designed ACAM, it designed it to work alongside these other federal broadband programs, including BEAD, which was in the loop when enhanced ACAM was really getting rolled out. The program even specifies that there's specific requirements for enhanced ACAM carriers to coordinate with the state broadband offices to participate in the BEAD challenge process. And many of them did. Why? To avoid duplication of funding. There were locations on that original bad broadband map that were taken off after operators said, hey, state, we've got enhanced ACAM to serve that, and we're going to serve it. Don't give somebody else the money because you're paying for two networks. Okay, we got you. Thank you. So the operators, the companies that have gone through this process and applied for BEAD have acted in good faith every step of the way. And the rules keep changing. Imagine if you go to play a football game and you throw a pass and it's a 10-yard pass. You figure first down. And the ref comes over and says, you know what? We decided the first downs are 30 yards now. So you got to punt. That's kind of what it feels like, right? Also, in the original act that spawned BEAD, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, nowhere in there did Congress say that BEAD recipients should be barred from receiving federal ongoing subsidies. In fact, if you look at it over the years, consistently, Congress has recognized that serving rural Americans requires both capital investment and ongoing support. So it's not an either or situation. It is a both situation. Administrator Roth said at some point during her remarks that they're trying to prevent another cycle of dependency. So that really kind of completely mischaracterized the nature of broadband service when you think about it. Because if you have to get broadband to a ranch or a farm, a place that's maybe 15, 20 miles from the nearest town, is that about dependency? No, it's about recognizing the economic reality. We need people living in rural areas as much as we need people living in cities. People in rural areas pay taxes. They vote. They're not they're not dependent. They're as or more independent as anyone else. But they also don't have a few $100,000 lying around to pay somebody to run a fiber to their ranch. So we've seen this all before. Previous broadband programs that have been focused on new construction have been done poorly. They've been administered poorly. Not all of them, but some of them have. RDOF is the one that everybody screams from the rooftops about. And it's true. RDOF was a dog. But a lot of effort went into implementing a BEAD program that would hold those providers accountable to prevent another RDOF from happening. That was the original bill was written that way. And it was a bipartisan bill. People in both parties voted for it. A lot of time and effort went to it. In fact, there's so much time and effort went into it. We all got really impatient when it didn't come out until it did, right? And then it came out, and then brakes are on. We're going to completely redo it now. States, you got 90 days to redo the whole thing. When you go to sleep tonight, say a little prayer for your state broadband officers. They have done amazing work, and they're very underappreciated. And right now, I know that they're feeling like, what can we do? We're being second guessed at every step of the process. We think we know what's best in our states because we actually live here, and we've talked to these people. We've met with the operators. We've met with the citizens, and we know what their feelings are, and we know what they need. And yet somebody's going to speak to some highfalutin institute and completely reverse course. So what do we do about this? Okay, that's the real bottom line here. We can rant. That's essentially what I'm doing now. And I apologize. Our Broadband Actions podcasts are usually not rants. This has kind of turned into one for very good reasons. But there are things we can do. I can't tell you they'll be successful because I honestly don't know if they'll be successful. But we have this once in a generation or once in a lifetime opportunity to close the digital divide once and for all on the infrastructure side. The digital inclusion equity side, that's already been kind of blown up. Another thing that, of course, here at CBAN, we're not real happy with, that the non-deployment funds have been pulled, and likely the states will not be allowed to use those non-deployment funds for anything else. But we still believe, and I know you all listening and watching do too, that rural communities deserve quality broadband. Just because someone lives in a rural area doesn't mean they're a second-class citizen. And that's essentially what these changes are going to result in. We got two types of broadband in America. Those for people living in towns and cities, and that for the rest of you. Sorry, you live in the country. You're on the outside looking in. So in addition to the quality of the service, right, and the fact that we think fiber networks are going to fill the bill best, and in any case, whether it's fiber or fixed wireless, a local community-focused provider is going to meet those needs best for the long term. We think that federal policy deserves to match that. So there's still time. There is still time for NTIA to say, whoopsie, we didn't mean that. Of course, we will not yank the federal ongoing operational subsidies for those operators who are sticking their necks out for BEAD, because they really are. They're sticking their necks out. Even though they are getting a tremendous subsidy here, it's still, in many cases, the local investment, that provider match, makes it almost unsustainable. And so we still have time to do the right thing. It's never too late to do the right thing until the wrong thing is done. And right now, the wrong thing is being talked about. The wrong thing has not 100% been done. But I'll tell you what, we might be hearing any day that the wrong thing has been done, in which case this conversation will be just a rant and not a call to action. So what is that call to action? Well, I'd say call your broadband office, but your state broadband office can't do much, honestly. This is going to take people talking to their elected representatives. I would gander a guess that your congressperson, that your senator has no idea what's going on with this. Now, they're obviously quite distracted. As we record this, we're in the middle of what seems like forever government shutdown, and so everybody's busy trying to make political hay on both parties for that. But they need to understand that these are consequences. These are concrete consequences of poor decision making. And In the end, the buck stops with them. And so I would say take a minute out of your very busy day. And if you're watching this, you're already way too busy to watch this. Thanks for doing it. But take a minute and call, write, email, text message, whatever, your congressman, your senator, and tell them this isn't right. You are going against the best interests of our rural residents. If you're a provider, like one of the CBAN members I mentioned that's probably going to have to pull out if this happens, your congressperson needs to hear about that because they probably have no idea. They have no idea that what Arielle Roth said could mean that one of their strong local broadband providers in their district that feeds the economy and enables others to improve their lives is going to get messed over with this. If they find that out, maybe, just maybe, they'll take action. Maybe they'll stand up and say, okay, we've gone too far. That's your best option, folks. Reach out, complain up, not over or down. All right. We'll do the same. And if anybody has any questions, reach out to me at CBAN. You know, we are always ready to answer your questions. Our email address is, this is our email. I should say this is our website. But my email is cdean@broadbandaction.com. Here, let me put that up on the screen. Obviously, when you're on a rant, sometimes you don't prepare as well as you'd like. So you get to listen to me type. There you go. There's my email. We're here for you, CBAN. We are a member-focused nonprofit organization. Our goal is building broadband bridges. And we want to see this broadband bridge built, not be blown up with dynamite. Thank you, everybody, for listening or watching. We'll see you next time, hopefully on a cheerier subject here on Broadband Action.